So how many knives do you have in your kitchen?
I actually have two knives. I'm a terrible chef, and they are both not as sharp as they should be. So.
Hello, everyone. This is David Stark from WatcherPass.com. And today I'm excited to be joined by Natasha Kermani, the director of Lucky, which is available on Shudder already and is released on VOD, digital HD, and DVD on August 3rd, 2021. We're going to talk to her in just a second, but first, let's check out the trailer. And while you're watching, if you can like and subscribe to this channel, that would be fantastic. It helps me out a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to our little group.
Thank you. This is a good bite. Lots of chocolate chips.
Oh, what?
Ted, I saw someone outside.
Honey, that's the man. Who comes every night and tries to kill us.
We're just gonna leave him?
Oh, I'm sure he's already gone.
He keeps coming back. He should be dead.
This man could be anywhere.
I just don't know what I would do in that situation.
Sure is scary. Very.
Hey, Natasha. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you?
Awesome. I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. This is Natasha Kermani, the director of Lucky, which is available on Shudder already, and it's releasing on VOD, digital HD, and DVD on August 3rd, 2021. So thank you so much for joining me. I love this film, so I'm really excited to talk about it.
Yay! Thank you. I love hearing that. Also, we're matching.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, so for horror movies, I tend to have more red, so this is just kind of a natural consequence of it. But I'm glad that we planned ahead to make sure that this looks appropriate.
Yeah, you coordinated. Yeah.
So I guess the first question is, I want to know, how did you find this movie? Like in my head, you hear like some glass breaking in the middle of the night, and you wake up and you see Brea Grant like standing over you with a script and a knife. So like, how did you come up to this? And is my recollection correct?
That's funny. Yeah. No. It was a very peaceful process. The script was actually sent to me by a producer who loved it and thought that I might respond to it, and he wanted to make the movie. And so I read it quickly because, I'm a big fan of Brea's. We knew each other socially, but we hadn't actually worked together. And so I read it quickly and I really got it. I felt like I could wrap my head around it. And so I called her and we had a really great sort of initial conversation to see if we're sort of on the same page and what I felt I could bring to it and sort of what her intentions were. And out of that first conversation, we were feeling really like, okay, I see the path to making this movie a reality, and sort of everything sort of came out of that initial conversation. But yeah, no home invasion break-ins occurred in the setting up of this movie.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. And I imagine you both felt very lucky after that initial meeting. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the feeling. Honestly, it's just been such a positive collaboration and just a really positive experience working with Brea. And so we really do feel very, very lucky, very fortunate to have had an opportunity to come together to work on something so sort of unique. And we really, it was just a really lovely experience, to be honest, working with her.
Yeah. And, I love that this is a horror film, and horror is I think the more I get into horror, the more I kind of see it's such a great genre to be able to tell these kind of entertaining, interesting stories with like other messages. And I feel like the last year or two, you've had a lot of films that kind of touch on some of the societal issues that women face, but do it in a way that you can that you can enjoy the process, or at least be entertained and kind of challenged by it. And I imagine that must have come through in the script. Was that something, I assume, that appealed to you and one of the reasons you really wanted to do this film?
Absolutely. What I really loved is Brea's sense of humor just sort of runs through the whole thing, this very dry sense. And I almost looked at the film as a satire that's sort of wearing the skin of a horror movie, right? So we're playing with slasher tropes and we're playing with sort of these iconic horror ideas. We even have a lot of sort of like indie horror character actors in the movie. But I loved that it was sort of taking it from this like sort of absurdist, I even saw it almost as an episode of The Twilight Zone or something, you know, in this horror context. And so that blend of things and that sort of fast-paced, honestly funny ethos that the script had was really important for me to keep that running all the way through into the final product. And so finding that balance between, obviously we're talking about very serious things and there's a very sort of heavy metaphor throughout the film, but Brea says it best. She says, you know, eating your veggies with the tasty stuff, you know, like it's still, you know, a fast moving sort of fun experience from start to finish, even though we are sort of dealing with these heavier topics and themes.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's what I liked about this film, because at the start you're kind of like you're wondering what's going on. Like some of the messages kind of bubble up as this kind of the story progresses, but then there's kind of this end sequence that really hits you where you kind of like the message becomes clear. And I loved that about it, because it was kind of like you and Brea say, like you're kind of eating your some food and it tastes good, and then at the end you're like, oh, that was also healthy too, and now now I'm better for it. Yeah,
Exactly.
And I love to hear that the humor was part of it throughout, because I wasn't sure if that was in the script or if that was something that you added to kind of help, you know, this really lovely, wonderful, dry sense of humor that was just so kind
100%
of
in the script, 100% in the script. And I think also I had the added benefit of knowing Brea as a person and knowing her sense of humor. I think she's hilarious. Like every time we hang out, I'm just like on the floor dying because she's so funny. So I think I came to it already with that awareness of her humor, of her dry, dark humor. And it was very exciting for me to be like, okay, great, this is fun. Now I get to sort of flex this muscle as a filmmaker and play in this satire world. And that expressed itself in a lot of different ways, including, you know, for me, I really wanted to cast comedy actors around her. I didn't really want to necessarily go with straight dramatic actors who would sort of like weigh down the scenes. We really wanted to find people with a background in improv and comedy. And so sort of putting the cast together was very much a part of that as well, and sort of finding the beats. And, you know, horror and comedy are both all about timing. And so I think but we see a lot of horror comedies, but they're often over the top. And I was very excited to see something that was satirical, but so dry and such a nuanced sort of absurdist sense of comedy that I really hadn't seen a lot. You know, it's not really a sandbox that a lot of people play in. So absolutely, it all started from the script, and then it was just about bringing it forward and expressing it.
Yeah, and I love that you said, you know, this it's like an absurdist kind of comedy, but it's not like slapstick. It's a very dry sense. And I also love that you said every time you hang out with Brea, you are dying from laughter, because I was thinking again, like, this film has the word puns on edge for me. So
there you have it. Yeah, there you have it.
And, you know, I think the other thing I loved so much about this film is this feels like a very personal film for Brea. Her writing and her performance feels very lived in, and I imagine this is something that she has dealt with, and it's something that, you know, pretty much any female in the industry must have dealt with things like this. So, you know, I guess how did you take your own kind of experiences and translate those into the screen? And was it interesting, painful, somewhere in between to kind of recreate that in this film? Even though it is kind of a dry comedy, it still has aspects of very painful, you know, issues.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it is a satire, but I think satire, you know, is dealing with really heavy, painful themes on its bottom, you know, and that is what makes it not a slapstick, silly thing. It is dealing with very real world problems. Yeah, I mean, when I read the script, it was actually during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, and I think there was a lot of sort of emotions and a lot of talking about believing women, not believing women, women's experiences not being necessarily treated with respect or with the fullness of respect that they demand. And so I think, you know, that sort of the context in which I read the script was definitely sort of electric. I think there was a lot of desire to sort of connect with other women and share our stories and our experiences. And I will say, you know, throughout not only the process, there were a lot of women that worked on this film. And I think for all of us, there was this sort of unspoken, you know, we don't need to necessarily talk about what this movie is about. We all get it 100%. You know, let's figure out how to make it work. And so having that base layer of understanding, because there is such a universality to the main character's experience, I think was very, very interesting and illuminating. And then beyond the process of making the movie, actually bringing the movie to festivals and eventually launching on Shudder, hearing from women who expressed, not in the industry, just women living in the world, saying, yeah, really, really interesting to see my own experience reflected on the screen. And so that's, I think, when we said, okay, from her initial kernel of an idea that's based on her experience, through all of us talking, sort of moving through our own experience, making the film, to releasing the film and having more conversations in that space. This is just a space that women want to connect on, and they want to, that's it. We want to connect with each other. And so the film is a part of that connectivity and a part of that larger conversation, which I think was Brea's intention. It was certainly our intention in making the film.
Yeah, and I think, it also, as a man, it can connect, I understand that women have a very unique perspective on this, and obviously I could never understand the type of uncertainty that you feel, but there are so many just wonderful lines that were just kind of really hit home. One of my favorites is when the "you're so lucky" comment, and Brea just does it perfectly. She's like, no, I worked my ass off for this. And there's also the comment about you always have to remain vigilant because you never know when a man can jump out, which is funny in the context, but also scarily true in society. So there's just, it's such a great way.
We tried to have that multi-layered meaning behind all of those big lines and all of those scenes where it does work on several different levels. And I think also when you really strip it down, it is this like very, very relatable experience that this very grounded, relatable person is having, of like being in this frustrating, nightmarish scenario that I agree, I think all audiences can connect with if they are open to having that experience and having that conversation. And of course, not everybody wants to talk about that stuff, but
hopefully they at least can try with it being having a wide release and being a horror film. So you mentioned that you read this during the Kavanaugh hearings, and that was actually something I was wondering about. Do you happen to know, was this written kind of during the Me Too movement, or was this something that Brea had been working on that just kind of happened to coincide with when the Me Too movement was gaining, traction and becoming kind of more mainstream?
I think it's just a coincidence, honestly. The Me Too movement is very young. It's a very young movement, and women have been experiencing these things forever. And so, no, I believe she had been working on the film for a number of years before sort of the hashtag Me Too movement really was up and running. I think that was just, for us, obviously, the Trump years, the Kavanaugh hearings, there are these sort of like linchpin moments where the conversation does get really loud and people are sort of having these conversations. And so, a lot of those early sort of connections that Brea and I made about the project happened to be during one of those sort of loud moments of conversation, but it's an ongoing, it's a 24/7 conversation. So
yeah, and I mean, I think it is good. It's obviously great that those conversations were happening, but it's also kind of good that I imagine that was part of what kind of helped get this movie made, was just having that, recognition that more stories have to be told like this. So
yeah.
One thing I was wondering is the ending. The ending, it's the ending, but is it always that way, or were there other drafts? I don't know, maybe happier drafts or things like that that you went through, or was this just kind of Brea's vision and this is kind of how it went?
There was definitely not any happier version of that.
Well, I guess that makes sense.
No, that was basically always the ending. She's sort of trapped in the nightmare in every version of the film. I would say the only difference is, one of the early versions, it just cut away and you never saw, she sort of like pulls the mask off of the scary guy and it cuts, to black and we don't see anything. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us felt, myself, the producers, a lot of the team sort of felt like, well, we should have some sort of semi-final choice that we make at the end of this movie, and not just like completely blue ball the audience. And so, yeah, and I think, people have also asked about like, oh, what would a sequel be? Do we keep going with May? And we really feel like this is the end of May's story. Unfortunately, she's not able to really connect. She is sort of trapped in the nightmare. But the reason the last shot is sort of her striking back is that is some, it's not completely nihilistic to me. It's like she still is going to keep fighting. She's going to keep sort of pushing her way through. So it's dark, but I wouldn't say it's like a completely nihilistic ending. And that was sort of important for me, that she didn't have a look of despair on her face at the end. It was more so like a determination to keep moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, that the film kind of stands on its own. There's some movies that you're kind of clamoring for a sequel at the end, but this film, I was like, this is a well told, self-contained story, and it has a lot of meaning, and there's really kind of no need to kind of continue it. I'd be interested in other stories that you will tell, but
exactly. Well, and I think other stories within, like if there was any version of it, it would be following other women in the world, and not necessarily May, but following other experiences. So yeah.
So I know we're running low on time. I'd like to switch. I call it the lightning round. It's just very short, lightweight questions about the film. They're usually funny and lightweight. This film presented a challenge for that, but I'm doing my best. Feel free to pass on the answers, but I try to keep them answerable. So
all right.
So the first question is: have you ever had an unusual situation where something that was concerning to you, other people kind of downplayed or thought was perfectly normal?
Oh my God, every day. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think as an adult, I'm much better at handling these situations. But yeah, I think for sure, yeah, every day. Probably in my early 20s, if there was like a concerning person that we were working with, or, I kind of grew up on movie sets. So like, that person is not great. Yeah. We should watch out for that person,
No, that's just Bob. That's just creepy Bob. He's just always there.
Creepy Bob is no good. Creepy Bob's got to go. So.
So how many knives do you have in your kitchen?
I actually have 2 knives. I'm a terrible chef, and they are both not as sharp as they should be. So. Okay.
And I guess that leads right into my next question. Where is your closest hammer?
Actually in this closet right behind me.
Oh, perfect. There you go. That's a good place.
You never know when a man might appear.
Yeah, you gotta always be vigilant. Always stay vigilant. Yeah. And so the last question is: you hear a noise in the middle of the night. What do you grab? Is it the hammer?
My dog.
Oh, perfect. That's a great answer. Unless your dog is like a Chihuahua, in which case that might not be a good answer.
He can hold his own. He can hold his own. As long as you don't offer him belly rubs, he can be real fierce. So.
and the faceless man did not seem like someone who would offer belly rubs, but I don't know, maybe he had multiple facets to his personality, but it didn't really seem like it.
Yeah, and by the way, the guy who plays, it's always true, the people who play the villains are always the sweetest people, and it was true in our case as well. Hunter definitely gives great dog belly rubs. So
okay, well that's good to hear as well. Must have been tough for him. Like his character is so just kind of cruel. It must have been tough to kind of just like cut and then just pull off the mask, and then he's just this nice sweet person.
A nice guy, always a big smile, and yeah, he's the best. So
and so the movie comes out, so it's already out on Shudder, and it's coming out August 3rd on VOD, digital HD, and on DVD. So I imagine you're going to be promoting it and kind of wrapping up this tour. But then what's next for you? Do you have other projects on the horizon, either yours or collaborations with Brea?
Yeah, so Brea and I are collaborating again. We had such a great experience. We wanted to keep going. So we are adapting a short story right now. And then we have also an original concept, both in the feature space that we are very excited about. And then I am also adapting a Joe Hill short story that is a sort of Gothic period piece. So. Yeah, that
is awesome to hear. I'm excited to see all of them, and thank you so much for your time. This is Natasha Kermani, the director of Lucky. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That was Natasha Kermani, the director of Lucky, which is already available on Shudder and is coming to VOD, digital HD, and DVD on August 3rd, 2021. It's one of those horror films that uses the genre to kind of shine a light on some other societal issues. It's a really well done film. I enjoyed it a lot, and I think you will too. If you like this interview, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot and make sure all my new content goes straight to you. And as always, please go to watchyourpast.com for all your movie reviews, interviews, and recommendations. Thank you.